There is a specific kind of silence inside a server room. It is not quiet, exactly. It is a hum. A deep, vibrating drone of cooling fans and spinning drives that sinks into your bones. For the last 25 years, that hum has been the soundtrack of my life. It was the sound of Logicor Solutions breathing. And I was the one making sure it didn't suffocate. I was on my knees on the anti-static floor tiles, replacing a burnt-out optical switch in rack 4. It was 6 in the evening on a Tuesday. Most of the staff had gone home, except for the cleaning crew and, unfortunately, my brother, Conrad. I heard him before I saw him. The heavy thud of his Italian loafers on the hallway linoleum, followed by the sound of him shouting into his phone. "I don't care if the market is down, Todd. Just liquidate the position. I need the cash for the down payment." Conrad burst into the server room without swiping his badge. He never carried his badge. He just kicked the door until the magnetic lock gave up or someone opened it for him. He was 40 years old, wearing a suit that cost more than my car, and he still had the frantic energy of a teenager who just crashed his dad's Porsche. "Valerie," he shouted over the hum of the servers. "Why is the Wi-Fi down in the executive wing? I'm trying to move some assets and the connection is crawling." I didn't look up. I clicked the new switch into place and watched the status light flicker from amber to a steady, reassuring green. "The Wi-Fi isn't down, Conrad. You're probably throttling the bandwidth again. What are you uploading?" "Nothing," he snapped, walking over to where I was kneeling. He looked down at me with that familiar mix of pity and annoyance. To him, I wasn't the chief technology officer. I was just the janitor of the internet. "I'm just trading some crypto files." "Look, just fix it. Dad is flying to New York tomorrow and I need to show him these projections." I stood up, dusting off my jeans. I was 48, with graying hair tied back in a messy bun and a hoodie that said NASA on it. I looked nothing like the rest of my family. My mother, Beatrice, was a former beauty queen who wouldn't be caught dead without pearls. My father, Preston, was a silver fox of a CEO who thought manual labor was a disease. And then there was Conrad, the golden child, who had never worked a real day in his life. "I'll reroute the traffic from the guest network," I said, walking past him to the main terminal. "But stop trading NFTs on the company's secure line. If you introduce malware again like you did last Christmas, I'm not spending my holiday scrubbing the database." Conrad rolled his eyes. "You're such a drama queen, Val. That wasn't malware. It was a beta test. It was a virus that encrypted our payroll system, Conrad," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "Done. Your internet is back. Go make your trades." He didn't say thank you. He never did. He just checked his phone, saw the bars reappear, and turned to leave. "By the way," he threw over his shoulder, "Dad wants the quarterly tech audit on his desk by morning. He says the investors need to see the efficiency metrics." "Investors?" I paused. "What investors?" Conrad froze for a split second. It was a tiny hesitation, a glitch in his smooth persona. "Just, standard capital raising. You know how it is. Expanding the fleet. Whatever. Just get it done." He walked out, leaving the door propped open. I stared at the empty doorway. Something felt off. Logicor wasn't expanding. We had been cutting costs for 2 years. We hadn't bought a new truck in 18 months. Why did they need an efficiency audit now? I walked over to the shared printer in the corner of the room to grab a diagnostic report I had run earlier. Buried in the stack of papers was a cover sheet that didn't belong to me. It must have been sent from the executive printer upstairs and rerouted here by mistake, probably another glitch caused by Conrad's bandwidth hogging. I pulled it out. It was a single page. A non-disclosure agreement header. The logo at the top didn't say Logicor. It said Apex Dynamics. My stomach dropped. Apex was the biggest logistics conglomerate in the country. They were sharks. They didn't invest in companies, they swallowed them whole, digested the assets, and spit out the bones. I folded the paper and shoved it into my pocket. My hands were shaking, just a little. I finished my shift in a daze. I drove home to my small house on the edge of town, far away from the manicured lawns of my parents' estate. My house was simple. Wood, glass, quiet. I went to the backyard. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the white wooden boxes lined up against the fence. My beehives. I put on my veil and gloves. This was my therapy. The bees didn't care about stock prices or Italian suits. They cared about the colony. They worked until they died for the good of the hive. Every bee had a job. Every bee was essential. If a bee didn't contribute, it was cast out. I opened the lid of the second hive and watched them work. Thousands of them, moving in perfect unison. "At least you guys are loyal," I whispered. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my mother. "Dinner tomorrow night. 7 p.m. sharp. We're something nice for once. Big news." I looked at the bees, then back at the text. I had a feeling the big news had something to do with the Apex Dynamics logo in my pocket. And I had a feeling I wasn't going to like it. The driveway to my parents' estate was lined with imported cypress trees that cost more than my entire college education. As I drove my 10-year-old Subaru up the winding path, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. This house was a museum of my parents' ego. I parked around the back, near the servants' entrance, out of habit. The front circle was occupied by Dad's vintage Jaguar and Conrad's brand new Range Rover. I walked into the dining room at exactly 7 o'clock. The table was set with the good china, the Royal Doulton set that only came out for weddings and funerals. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. My mother, Beatrice, was arranging a centerpiece of white lilies. She looked up as I entered, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Well," she said, her smile tight. "At least you brushed your hair, Valerie. Is that a new blouse?" "I've had it for 5 years, Mom," I said, taking my usual seat at the far end of the table. "Good to see you too." "Don't be snippy," she said, waving a hand. "Tonight is a celebration. Pour yourself some wine. It's a 2005 Bordeaux." My father, Preston, walked in from his study. He looked flushed, victorious. He was 74, but tonight he looked 10 years younger. The weight of the failing business seemed to have lifted off his shoulders. Conrad followed him, grinning like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "Valerie!" Preston boomed. "Glad you could make it. We didn't want to start without the whole family." That was a lie. They started without me all the time. But I nodded and took a sip of the wine. It was excellent. It tasted like money. "So," I said, deciding to rip the bandage off. "What's the occasion? Did Conrad finally learn how to tie his own shoes?" Conrad stopped grinning and shot me a glare. "Ha ha. Very funny, Val." "No. Better." Preston stood at the head of the table. He tapped his fork against his glass. The sound rang out, sharp and clear. "We have done it," Preston announced, his voice trembling with emotion. "For 40 years, your mother and I have built Logicor from a single truck into a regional empire. We have weathered recessions, strikes, and fuel shortages. But tonight, we have secured our legacy." He paused for dramatic effect. "As of this afternoon, we have signed a definitive agreement to sell Logicor solutions to Apex Dynamics." I gripped the stem of my wine glass. I knew it. But hearing it out loud was different. It felt like a physical blow. "Apex?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Dad, they're asset strippers. They'll fire half the staff. They'll dismantle the fleet. They are paying us $850 million, Preston said, articulating every syllable. 850. Million. The room went silent. The number hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating. Cash and stock deal, Conrad piped up, unable to help himself. We close in 30 days. Do you know what this means? We're royalty, Val. We are actual royalty. Beatrice reached out and squeezed Preston's hand. We can finally retire, darling. We can get that villa in Tuscany. We deserve this. I looked at them. They were so happy. They were drunk on the number. And for a second, I waited for them to acknowledge the obvious. That's a lot of money, I said slowly. So, what's the transition plan? The tech stack is custom. Apex uses a different architecture. They're going to need me to migrate the dynamic route optimization system. That takes 6 months, minimum. Preston cleared his throat. He exchanged a quick glance with Conrad. Actually, Valerie, Preston said, pouring himself more wine. That's part of the news. Apex has their own engineering team, Conrad said, leaning back in his chair. They're huge. They have hundreds of devs in Silicon Valley. They don't need our legacy IT department. Legacy? I felt a cold spike in my stomach. I wrote that code, Conrad. It's the only reason our trucks are 20% more efficient than the competition. It's not legacy. It's the core of the business. It's part of the asset sale, Preston said dismissively. It's included in the price. The point is, Valerie, you don't need to worry about the migration. You don't need to worry about anything. So. I put my glass down. What is my share? The silence that followed was different. It wasn't heavy. It was sharp. Your share? Beatrice repeated, her voice dropping an octave. What do you mean, your share? I own 15% of the company stock options, I said. From the restructuring in 2011. When I saved us from bankruptcy. Remember? Preston chuckled. It was a dry, brittle sound. Oh, Valerie. Those were performance options. They expired years ago. We rolled them back into the general fund to cover overhead. You, what? I stood up. You can't just roll them back. That was my equity. That was my retirement. Sit down, Valerie, Preston barked. The jovial father was gone. The CEO was back. Stop making this about you. This is a family victory. So I get nothing? I asked, my voice rising. 25 years. I built the system that made this company worth $850 million. And I get nothing? You got a salary. Beatrice snapped. We paid for your college. We gave you a job when nobody else would hire a college dropout who liked playing with bugs more than people. You have been well compensated. I looked at Conrad. He was smirking. He looked down at his plate, hiding his smile. This is unbelievable, I whispered. It's business, Preston said. Now, sit down and eat your steak. It's Wagyu. I didn't sit down. I couldn't feel my legs. The betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was the erasure. They were erasing 25 years of my life with a single signature. Where is the money going? I asked. I needed to know. I needed to hear them say it. $850 million. If it's not going to the employees, and it's not going to me, where is it going? It's going into the family trust, Preston said, slicing his steak with surgical precision. To secure the lineage. The lineage, I repeated. You mean Conrad? Conrad has a vision, Beatrice said defensively. He wants to start a venture capital firm. He has big ideas, Valerie. He's going to turn that money into billions. Conrad lost $200,000 on Digital Monkey Pictures last month. I shouted. He can't run a lemonade stand, let alone a venture capital firm. That's enough. Preston slammed his hand on the table. The crystal glasses rattled. I will not have you insult your brother in this house. He is the future of this family. You? You are the help, Valerie. You always have been. You're a mechanic. A very good mechanic, but just a mechanic. The words hit me harder than a physical slap. Just the help. I looked over at Mr. Henderson, the family lawyer, who was sitting quietly at the far end of the table. He had been with us for 30 years. He looked pale. He was staring at his napkin. Mr. Henderson, I said, turning to him. You drafted the paperwork. Is this true? Did they strip my equity? Mr. Henderson looked up. His eyes darted to Preston, then to me. He cleared his throat nervously. Valerie, the corporate structure is complex. Technically, the board has the right to dilute shares if— Shut up, Henderson, Preston growled. She doesn't need a legal lecture. She needs to learn her place. Preston stood up and walked toward me. He was a tall man, imposing. He used his height to intimidate people. It usually worked. We are giving the proceeds to Conrad, Preston said, standing inches from my face. Because he is the one who will carry the name forward. You? You live in that shack with your insects. You have no ambition. You are 48 years old and you have nothing to show for it. I have the code, I said quietly. I have the system that runs your empire. Not anymore, Preston smiled. It was a cruel smile. As of tomorrow morning, Apex owns everything. The trucks, the buildings, the servers, and the code. And since you seem so unhappy with the arrangement. He paused, savoring the moment. You're fired. My breath hitched. What? You heard me. You're fired. For insubordination. For cause. Meaning no severance package. He gestured toward the door. Get out of my house. Go pack your desk. Actually, don't bother. Security will mail you a box. Just give me your badge. I stared at him. I looked at my mother. She was sipping her wine, refusing to meet my eyes. I looked at Conrad. He was beaming, finally the winner. You're making a mistake, I said. My voice was surprisingly calm. The shock had passed, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The only mistake I made was keeping you on the payroll this long, Preston sneered. Now, get out. Mr. Henderson stood up halfway. Preston, wait. We should consider the— Sit down, Henderson. Preston roared. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my key card, the master key that opened every door in Logie Corps. I dropped it into Preston's half-eaten mashed potatoes. Goodbye, Dad, I said. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I walked past the servants' entrance, past the expensive cars, and got into my Subaru. As I drove down the long driveway, leaving the estate behind, I didn't cry. My hands were steady on the wheel. My father thought he held all the cards. He thought he owned the company, the code, and me. But as I turned onto the highway, heading back to my quiet house and my bees, I remembered something. I remembered a rainy afternoon in 2011. I remembered a desperate man begging his 33-year-old daughter to save his company. And I remembered a document tucked away in the fireproof safe in my study. Section 17C. They had forgotten. But I hadn't. My house felt different when I got back. Usually, it felt empty, a little too quiet for one person. Tonight, it felt like a fortress. I locked the front door, turned off the porch light, and walked straight to my study. The study was my real sanctuary. One wall was covered in framed blueprints of early combustion engines. The other was lined with books on coding languages that haven't been used since the 90s. In the corner, behind a heavy oak desk, was a floor safe. I spun the dial. Left to 32. Right to 14. Left to 5. The heavy steel door clicked open. Inside, underneath my birth certificate and the deed to the house, was a manila envelope. It was dusty. I hadn't touched it in almost a decade. I pulled it out and sat on the floor, my legs crossed. I carefully undid the string tie and slid the document out. Emergency Restructuring and Intellectual Property Assignment Agreement, dated April 12, 2011. I ran my fingers over the paper. I remembered that day vividly. It was raining. The old office roof was leaking into buckets in the hallway. Preston, my dad, was crying. He was actually crying in his office. The bank was threatening to foreclose on the fleet. We had missed payroll twice. The drivers were threatening to strike. I was 33. I had just sold my condo, my first real asset, and liquidated my savings. I had $200,000 in cash. It was everything I had. Dad begged me for it. He said it was a loan. But I knew loans to family never came back. So I made him a deal. I would give him the cash to make payroll, and I would build him a new automated dispatch system that would cut fuel costs by 30%. But in exchange, I wanted protection. I flipped to page 12. Section 17C, Reversion Rights. The clause was short. Brutally simple. In the event that Logicor Solutions does not exercise the option to purchase the exclusive rights to the Dynamic Route Optimization, DRO, patents in perpetuity for the sum of $10 million within 15 years of this signing, all rights, ownership, and royalties shall revert automatically to the author, Valerie. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Preston's signature was shaky, desperate. He had laughed when he signed it. $10 million, he had said, wiping his eyes. Valerie, if this company is ever worth enough to pay you $10 million for some computer code, I'll be the happiest man alive. Sure. Put it in. It's monopoly money. 15 years. I looked at the calendar on my phone. April 12, 2011. Plus 15 years. That meant the deadline was April 12, 2026. Today was April 24th. They had missed the deadline by 12 days. They were so busy popping champagne for the sale to Apex, so busy measuring the drapes for their Tuscan villa, that they forgot to check the expiration date on the foundation of their house. My heart started to pound. Not from fear. From adrenaline. I wasn't just an employee they fired. I wasn't just the help. I was the landlord. And their lease had just expired. I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. I knew exactly what to do. I opened my laptop and logged into the United States Patent and Trademark Office portal. I had kept my creator account active all these years, updating the maintenance fees out of my own pocket, just in case. I navigated to the Transfer of Ownership tab. I uploaded the scanned copy of the 2011 agreement. I highlighted Section 17C. I filled out the assertion of reversion form. The website asked me to confirm, "Are you the original author?" I clicked yes. "Has the exclusivity period expired without purchase?" I clicked yes. I hit submit. A little spinning wheel appeared on the screen. It spun for 5 seconds. 5 seconds that changed my life. Submission received. Processing. Estimated confirmation, 48 to 72 hours. I closed the laptop. I walked to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. My hands were perfectly steady now. Dad wanted to give everything to Conrad. He wanted to secure the lineage. Well, he was about to learn a hard lesson about genetics. Conrad might have his eyes, but I had his ruthlessness. And unlike them, I read the fine print. The next 3 days were strange. I was unemployed for the first time in 25 years. I woke up at 6, but instead of rushing to the server room to put out fires, I made coffee and sat on my back porch. I watched the bees. They were busy. The spring nectar flow was starting. They were bringing in pollen, bright yellow, deep orange. They were building. My phone was quiet. Logicor had cut my access to the company email servers at 8:01 a.m. the morning after the dinner. They had remote wiped my company phone, but I had expected that, so I was using my personal burner. I spent the time working on a project I had neglected, restoring a vintage Patek Philippe pocket watch from the 1920s. It was a complex mechanism. Hundreds of tiny gears, springs, and levers working in perfect harmony. If one gear was misaligned, the whole thing stopped. That was exactly what Logicor was. A complex machine. And they had just fired the only person who knew how to wind it. On the morning of the third day, my personal email pinged. From USPTO.gov subject, notification of patent reversion recordation complete. I opened it. Attached was a formal certificate. This document certifies that all rights, title, and interest in U.S. patent numbers 8,442,101, dynamic route optimization, 8,442,102, predictive fuel logic, and 8,442,103, autonomous dispatch sharding, have been reverted to the original inventor, Valerie Vance. I owned it. I owned the brain of the company. I printed 3 copies of the certificate. Then, I drafted a letter. I didn't use legal jargon. I kept it simple. To the Board of Directors of Logicor Solutions and the Acquisitions Department of Apex Dynamics, as of this date, I assert my exclusive ownership of the underlying technology currently powering the Logicor logistical fleet. The license granted in 2011 has expired. Any continued use of this technology constitutes willful infringement of intellectual property. You have 24 hours to cease operations of all software utilizing my code, or secure a new licensing agreement. Regards, Valerie Vance. I put the letters in FedEx envelopes. I marked them priority overnight signature required. I drove to the shipping center. The girl behind the counter weighed the envelopes. Important stuff, she asked, popping gum. You could say that, I smiled. It's an eviction notice. She laughed, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. I drove home and waited. I knew how the timeline would work. The letters would arrive around 10 a.m. the next day. It would take about 30 minutes for the mailroom to sort them. Another 30 minutes for legal to read them. And then, around noon, the screaming would start. I went back to my watch. I placed the final gear into position, the escapement wheel. I wound the mainspring. Tick. 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 The watch came alive. It was perfect. At 11:42 a.m. the next day, my phone buzzed. Incoming call, Dad. I let it ring. Incoming call, Dad. I let it ring again. Incoming call, Mom. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb and set it face down on the table. The buzzing continued, vibrating against the wood like an angry hornet. I poured another cup of tea. By 1 p.m., my phone had 47 missed calls. 20 from Preston. 12 from Beatrice. 10 from Conrad. And 5 from a number I didn't recognize. Probably the poor general counsel at Logicor who was currently having a heart attack. I decided to listen to a few voicemails, just to gauge the temperature of the fire I had started. I played the first one from Preston. Valerie. What the hell is this? I just got a letter from the patent office? Is this some kind of sick joke? Call me back immediately. You are embarrassing this family. He sounded confused. Angry, but confused. He still thought he was in charge. I skipped to the third one from him, recorded 20 minutes later. Valerie, pick up the phone. Apex just called us. Their legal team is freaking out. They're threatening to pause the deal. You need to sign a waiver saying this is a mistake. Right now. Do you hear me? I will sue you into the ground. Panic. Good. Then I played one from Conrad. Hey, Val, Look, Dad is losing it. Just, come on, stop playing games. We can give you something, okay? Maybe 50 grand? Just sign the paper. I have investors lined up for my fund, I can't look like an idiot. Call me. 50 grand. He was still trying to buy a diamond with a coupon. The last one was from Mom. Her voice was trembling, but it was that dangerous, icy tremble she used when I was a child and didn't clean my room. I don't know who you think you are, doing this to your father. He has high blood pressure, Valerie. If he has a stroke, it's on your hands. You are being selfish and vindictive. Fix this. I deleted the messages. I wasn't going to face them alone. I knew my family. They wouldn't play fair. They would bully, lie, and cheat. I needed a shark. I called Mr. Galliano. I had met Victor Galliano a few years ago at a tech conference. He was a corporate IP litigator who wore bespoke suits and smiled like a crocodile. He had given me his card and said, if you ever decide to stop letting that company exploit you, call me. He picked up on the second ring. Valerie Vance, his voice was smooth, deep. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I saw the USPTO filing this morning. It popped up on my tracker. Very aggressive. Hello, Victor, I said. I need representation. I assume Logicor is melting down? They are. Apex is involved now too. Excellent, Galliano chuckled. I love a three-way dogfight. What is your goal here, Valerie? Do you want a settlement? A reinstatement? An apology? I looked out the window at my beehives. I thought about the dinner. I thought about Preston throwing my key card into the mashed potatoes. I thought about being called to help. No settlement, I said. I want full market value. I want them to realize that they sold a house they didn't own. I want to squeeze them, Victor. Until the pips squeak. Music to my ears, Galliano said. I'll draft a formal cease and desist. I'll demand an immediate injunction on their fleet. Every truck using your algorithm is a rolling crime scene. I'll send it over within the hour. And Valerie? Yes? Don't answer your phone. Don't talk to them. Don't open your door. Let me be the wall. Consider it done, I said. I hung up. The house was quiet again, but the energy had changed. The fuse was lit. The bomb had gone off. Now, all I had to do was watch the smoke rise. I walked to the kitchen and made a sandwich. I took a bite, and for the first time in 3 days, food actually tasted good. Wow, things are heating up. Valerie just dropped the nuke on her family. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Would you take the 50 grand or burn it all down? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, if you're enjoying the revenge, smash that like button and subscribe. Comment your city so I know where my listeners are from. Every comment helps the channel grow. Thank you. The siege began at 8 a.m. the next morning. It didn't start with a lawsuit, it started with a banging on my front door that was loud enough to wake the dead. I was in my kitchen, feeding my sourdough starter. I checked the security monitor mounted on the wall. It was Conrad. He was wearing the same suit from yesterday, rumpled and stained. He looked like he hadn't slept. He pounded on the door again. Valerie. I know you're in there. Open this damn door. I didn't move. I took a sip of my coffee and pressed the intercom button. Go away, Conrad, I said. My voice echoed through the speaker on the porch. I have nothing to say to you. Conrad glared at the camera lens, his face distorted by the fisheye effect. You can't do this, Val. Do you have any idea what you've done? Apex has frozen the funds. The deal is stuck in escrow. They're asking questions we can't answer. That sounds like a you problem, I replied calmly. You should have checked the IP ownership before you tried to sell it. Dad is willing to be generous. Conrad shouted, changing tactics. He pulled a checkbook out of his pocket. He authorized me to write you a check right now. $200,000. Tax-free. Just sign the waiver, hand over the keys to the repo, and we forget this ever happened. I laughed. I couldn't help it. 200,000? Conrad, the valuation of the patents is roughly 40% of the total deal. That's $340 million. And you're offering me 0.05%? It's better than nothing, he screamed, kicking the bottom of the door. You're just a greedy spinster. You don't even have kids. What do you need money for? I have a legacy to build. Get off my porch, Conrad. No. I'm not leaving until you sign. He picked up a ceramic planter, one of my favorites, and smashed it against the siding of the house. Dirt and shards of pottery exploded everywhere. I didn't flinch. I just picked up my phone and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? I have an intruder attempting to break into my home, I said, my voice steady. He is violent and destroying property. My address is 42 Oak Lane. Is the intruder known to you? Yes. It's my brother. But he's not welcome here. I watched on the monitor as Conrad paced back and forth, screaming obscenities about my bees, my sad little life, and how I was jealous of his success. 5 minutes later, a cruiser pulled into the driveway. 2 officers stepped out. Conrad tried to pull the "Do you know who my father is" card. It didn't work. When he resisted the officer trying to calm him down, they handcuffed him. I watched them shove him into the back of the cruiser. It was a humiliating sight, the heir to the Logicor empire, being hauled away like a common drunk. I felt a pang of sadness. Not for him, but for the little boy I used to help with his math homework. That boy was gone. This man was just a hollow shell filled with my father's expectations. I went outside after they left to sweep up the broken pottery. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Galliano. Your father just filed a complaint. They are suing you for corporate sabotage and theft of trade secrets. Emergency hearing tomorrow. Wear a suit. It's showtime. The conference room at the downtown law firm was cold. It smelled of lemon polish and fear. On one side of the mahogany table sat my parents. Preston looked 10 years older than he had at the dinner. His skin was gray, his eyes bloodshot. Beatrice sat next to him, clutching her pearls like a lifeline. They had brought a team of 4 lawyers from a white shoe firm. On the other side sat me and Victor Galliano. Just us. Victor was relaxed, leaning back in his chair, tapping a silver pen against his legal pad. Let's cut to the chase, Preston's lead attorney, a man named Sterling, barked. Your client, Ms. Vance, has illegally accessed Logicor servers post-termination. She has locked down the dynamic route optimization system, effectively holding the company hostage. This is cyberterrorism. Strong words, Victor smiled. Do you have proof of this, access? Sterling slid a thick stack of papers across the table. Server logs. Showing Ms. Vance's admin credentials accessing the core kernel at 8 p.m. on Tuesday. 12 hours after she was terminated. I looked at the logs. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't accessed the system. Had I? Then I looked closely at the timestamps. These are UTC timestamps, I said, speaking for the first time. Sterling sneered. So? So, I continued, pointing at the page. Logicor servers are based on Eastern Standard Time. 8 p.m. Universal Time Coordinated is 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I was still employed at 4 p.m. on Tuesday. I was in the server room, fixing a switch Conrad broke. I slid the paper back. I didn't hack your system. I just stopped maintaining it. And without me, it breaks. You built a kill switch. Preston shouted, slamming his hand on the table. You rigged it to fail. Mr. Vance, Victor interjected, his voice silky smooth. Please control yourself. My client didn't build a kill switch. She built a highly complex, proprietary engine that requires a specific key to run. That key is her intellectual property. When you fired her, you threw away the key. It's work for hire. Sterling argued. She was an employee. Not according to the 2011 agreement. Victor pulled out the document. Section 17C. The IP reverted. It is now legally her private property. And every single one of your 500 trucks currently on the road is using her property without a license. That is theft, Mr. Sterling. My client isn't the thief here. You are. Preston looked like he was going to have a stroke. We paid for her college. We gave her a job. Irrelevant, Victor said. The law doesn't care about your parenting expenses. It cares about contracts. And you signed this one. Beatrice spoke up, her voice trembling with venom. Valerie, please. Don't do this. Apex is going to walk away. You are destroying everything we built. You destroyed it, I looked her in the eye. When you decided I was just the help. When you decided to give my life's work to Conrad. We can offer a settlement, Sterling said quickly, sensing his client was losing ground. $5 million. One-time payment. Victor laughed. A loud, genuine laugh. $5 million? For the engine of an $850 million deal? Try again. Or don't. We are happy to let Apex do their own due diligence. You wouldn't dare, Preston hissed. You signed an NDA. The NDA covers trade secrets, I said. It doesn't cover me proving ownership of my own property to a potential buyer who is about to purchase stolen goods. I stood up. I'm meeting with the Apex technical audit team tomorrow. I suggest you tell them the truth before I do. We walked out. As the door closed, I heard Preston throw a glass against the wall. It shattered. The meeting with Apex Dynamics took place in a neutral location, a hotel conference suite near the airport. The Apex team was serious. 3 engineers, 2 lawyers, and their CTO, a woman named Dr. Eris Thorne. I had read her papers on algorithmic logistics. She was brilliant. She wasn't going to be fooled by bluster. Preston and Conrad were there too, sitting in the corner like scolded children. They weren't allowed to speak. Ms. Vance, Dr. Thorne said, shaking my hand. We've reviewed your patent filing. It looks legitimate. However, Logicorp claims that their current system has evolved significantly beyond your original 2011 patents. They claim it is a derivative work that they own. That's their claim, I nodded. But I can prove that the foundation is identical. How? Dr. Thorne asked. I opened my laptop. I need access to the live code repository. Read only. Preston started to protest, but the Apex lawyer silenced him with a look. They granted me access. I projected the code onto the big screen. It was a wall of text, millions of lines of C++ and Python. When I wrote the core kernel, I explained, I used a specific variable naming convention to track the logic threads. I'm an amateur apiarist. A beekeeper. I typed a search command into the terminal. grep our apis _ mellifera. The screen lit up. Hundreds of results scrolled by. Apis mellifera, I said. The European honeybee. That's the main routing thread. I typed another. grep our bombus. The bumblebee. That's the load balancing algorithm. I turned to Dr. Thorne. If this system had been rewritten or evolved, these core variable names would have been refactored. No modern dev uses Latin B names for fuel injection logic. These are the load-bearing walls of the house. You can paint the walls, you can change the windows, but if you take out these beams, the house falls down. Dr. Thorne stared at the screen. She scrolled through the code herself. She saw the dates. She saw the structure. She turned to Preston. Mr. Vance. You told us this was a proprietary system built by a team of 20 developers over the last 5 years. Preston stammered. We updated the interface. The dashboard is completely new. The dashboard is a skin, Dr. Thorne said coldly. The engine is hers. And she holds the title. She closed her laptop. We cannot proceed with this acquisition. The IP liability alone is catastrophic. If she shuts down the license, we buy a fleet of trucks that can't move. We can fix it. Conrad shouted from the corner. I can hire a team. We can rewrite it in a week. Dr. Thorne looked at Conrad with pity. Young man, this is kernel-level architecture. It would take a year to reverse engineer and rewrite this without breaking the existing contracts. You don't have a week. She stood up and looked at me. Ms. Vance, I apologize for the wasted time. It seems we were misinformed about the assets. No hard feelings, I said. As the Apex team packed up, Preston sat with his head in his hands. The deal was dead. $850 million had just evaporated in a puff of smoke. I walked past my father. He didn't look up. He looked small. You should have paid the $10 million, Dad, I whispered. I thought the victory would be the end of it. I thought they would retreat, lick their wounds, and maybe, finally, negotiate. I was wrong. When a narcissist loses control, they don't negotiate. They try to destroy the person who took control away. 2 days after the Apex deal collapsed, I woke up to my phone blowing up with notifications. Not calls, social media tags. My mother had gone nuclear. She had given an exclusive interview to a local news station, and then posted a long, rambling sob story on her Facebook page, which had thousands of followers in the local community. The headline on the news clip read, Elderly couple extorted by estranged daughter, local business in peril. I watched the video in horror. Beatrice was sitting in her living room, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Preston was holding her hand, looking frail and defeated. We gave her everything, Beatrice sobbed on camera. We put her through school. We supported her when she couldn't find a husband. And now, in our twilight years, when we just want to retire, she has stolen our company's passwords and is holding us hostage for millions of dollars. She wants to bankrupt her own parents. The reporter, a young woman looking for a viral story, added solemnly, Logicor employs over 300 people in our town. Their jobs are now at risk because of this family dispute. The comments section was a cesspool. What a monster. Ungrateful brat. She should be in jail. I hope the parents sue her for everything. Someone should go to her house and teach her a lesson. I felt sick. My hands shook as I scrolled. They were weaponizing the community against me. They were painting me as a hacker, a thief, a villain. My doorbell rang. I jumped. I looked at the monitor. It wasn't the police. It was a reporter. And behind him, a news van. I closed the blinds. I felt trapped in my own home. My phone rang. It was Victor. Don't look at the internet, he said immediately. Too late, I said, my voice cracking. Victor, they're lying. They're saying I stole passwords. They're saying I'm extorting them. I know, Victor said. His voice was hard, dangerous. And they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. How? Everyone hates me. Valerie, listen to me. They just went on public record accusing you of a crime, extortion and theft, that we have already proven in a legal deposition you did not commit. That is defamation per se. It is malice. I don't care about the law right now, Victor. There are people outside my house. Let them stand there, Victor said. Because when we file this defamation suit, we aren't just going after the company assets. We are going after their personal assets. The house. The cars. The trust fund. Everything. I just want it to stop, I whispered. It will stop, Victor promised. But we have to hit back. Harder. I need you to authorize me to release the 2011 agreement and the audio recording of the board meeting where Preston called you the help. We need to control the narrative. I hesitated. Releasing the audio meant exposing the private rot of my family to the world. It meant there was no going back. No reconciliation. Ever. I looked at the window where the reporters were camped out. I thought about my bees. I thought about how hard I worked to build a quiet, decent life. And I thought about my mother's fake tears on that screen. Do it, I said. Burn it down. Good girl, Victor said. Watch the news at 6. I hung up. I went to the safe and took out the digital drive containing the backups of every board meeting for the last 10 years. I had kept them for compliance. Now, they were ammunition. They wanted a media war? Fine. I had the truth. And the truth was about to hurt a lot more than a lie. The thing about desperate people is that they stop thinking rationally. They start thinking in miracles. And for my brother Conrad, the miracle was a shady dev team from Eastern Europe he found on a dark web forum. I found out about it because I still had a backdoor. Not into the servers, that would be illegal, but into the public-facing API status page. It was a simple dashboard I built years ago to let clients track their shipments. It was publicly accessible, perfectly legal to watch, and right now, it was flashing red. It was 2 a.m. on a Friday. The smear campaign was still raging on Facebook, but inside Logicore, panic had set in. With the Apex deal dead and my legal injunction looming, Conrad decided to play hero. According to the chatter on the sysadmin forums, where Logicore's junior devs were leaking info like a sieve, Conrad had fired the internal IT team for incompetence and hired an external SWAT team of coders. Their mission? To strip out my proprietary code and replace it with a patch. Overnight. It was suicide. You don't replace the engine of a 747 while it's in midair. I sat in my dark office, illuminated only by the glow of my monitor, watching the disaster unfold in real time. At 2:15 a.m., the status board showed a system reboot. They were pushing the patch. At 2:18 a.m., the system came back online. All green. They didn't. I whispered. Had they actually done it? Had they managed to refactor the dependency logic that quickly? At 2:30 a.m., the first error popped up. Error 404, route not found. Then another. Error 502, bad gateway. Then a flood. The map on the dashboard, which usually showed thousands of little trucks moving like diligent ants across the country, started to freeze. The patch had deleted the Apis mellifera routing logic, but they hadn't realized that the fuel injection subroutine relied on that logic to calculate idle times. When the routing logic vanished, the truck's onboard computers didn't just lose the map, they locked the ignition to prevent theft. It was a security feature I wrote in 2014. If the system couldn't verify the route, it assumed the truck was stolen and shut down the engine. 500 trucks, carrying millions of dollars in perishable goods, produce, pharmaceuticals, seafood, simultaneously turned into 5-ton bricks on highways across America. I switched on the news. It took about an hour for the reports to start coming in. Breaking news, massive traffic jams reported on I-95 and I-80 as dozens of Logicore delivery trucks stall in middle lanes. Then came the angry tweets from clients. At Logicore, where's my shipment? Your driver says the truck won't start. We have 10 tons of frozen salmon melting in a Logicore trailer in Arizona. Lawsuit coming. I watched the stock ticker for Logicore. It was a private company, but the debt bonds were traded. They were plummeting. My phone rang. It wasn't Victor. It wasn't my parents. It was a blocked number. I picked up. Fix it. It was Conrad. He sounded like he was crying. He was whispering, terrified. Fix it, Val. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just tell me the override code. The drivers are stranded. There's a truck blocking an ambulance in Chicago. Dad is going to kill me. I sat there, listening to his ragged breathing. This was the boy who smashed my planter. This was the man who called me a greedy spinster. I can't fix it, Conrad, I said softly. You deleted the brain. You lobotomized the fleet. There is no override code for stupidity. You have to help me. We'll lose everything. You already lost everything, I said. You lost at the moment you thought you were smarter than the person who built the machine. I hung up. By dawn, the National Guard was being called to tow trucks off major interstates. The FDA was issuing warnings about spoiled food. Logicor wasn't just bankrupt, it was radioactive. I closed my laptop. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. I had built that system to be perfect. Watching it die was like watching a beautiful building collapse. But then I remembered the smear campaign. I remembered the lies. And I realized that sometimes, you have to let the building fall to clear the rot from the foundation. The final meeting didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened in the liquidation office of a bankruptcy court, 3 weeks later. The room was gray. Gray carpet, gray walls, gray faces. My parents sat on one side of the metal table. They looked like ghosts. Preston had lost 20 pounds. His suit hung off him loosely. Beatrice wasn't wearing pearls. She was wearing a tracksuit and looking at the floor. Conrad wasn't there, his lawyers had advised him to stay hidden to avoid being served more subpoenas from angry vendors. Victor Galliano sat next to me. On my other side sat the representatives from Vanguard Systems, Logicor's biggest rival. Vanguard had been trying to crush us for a decade. Now, they were here to pick the meat off the bones. The Vanguard CEO, a sharp woman named Eleanor, slid a document across the table toward me. Ms. Vance, Eleanor said. We have reviewed your patent portfolio. It is elegant. Superior to ours in every way. Vanguard is prepared to offer you a direct purchase of the IP rights, independent of the Logicor assets. She named a number. $120 million. Plus a 5% royalty on all future software licensing. It wasn't the $850 million Apex had offered for the whole company, but this was just for the code. And it was all mine. I accept, I said, signing the paper. Victor grinned. Now, regarding the physical assets of Logicor Solutions. He turned to Preston. Vanguard is willing to acquire the physical fleet, the trucks, the warehouses, the depots, as distressed assets, Eleanor said, her voice devoid of emotion. Given the current state of the fleet and the massive liability from the spoilage lawsuits, we are offering $12 million. Preston looked up. His eyes were watery. 12 million? The real estate alone is worth 50. The real estate is leveraged to the hilt, Eleanor pointed out. And you have $40 million in outstanding lawsuits from clients who lost their cargo last week. 12 million is a gift, Preston. It allows you to pay off the bank and avoid prison for negligence. You walk away with nothing, but you walk away free. Preston looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. He wasn't the CEO anymore. He was just an old man who had gambled and lost. Valerie, he rasped. Help us. Please. You just made $100 million. Buy the debt. Save the family name. I looked at Beatrice. She was finally looking at me, her eyes pleading. The same woman who went on TV and called me a monster. The family name? I asked. You mean the name you tried to give to Conrad? The name you kicked me out of? I stood up. I smoothed out my blazer. I'm not buying the debt, Dad. I'm not saving the company. I'm moving on. Vanguard offered me the position of head of innovation. I have a team to lead. I have work to do. I turned to Eleanor. The deal looks good. Let's close. Preston put his head on the table and sobbed. It was a guttural, ugly sound. Beatrice put a hand on his back, but she was watching me. And in her eyes, I didn't see love. I saw calculation. She was already wondering how to ask me for a loan later. One more thing, I said, pausing at the door. The clock in the lobby of the old headquarters. The grandfather clock. It was my grandfather's. Take it, Preston whispered into the table. Take it all. I will, I said. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air smelled fresh. Victor walked beside me, whistling a happy tune. You realize, Victor said, that you just pulled off the most successful hostile takeover in family business history? It wasn't hostile, Victor, I smiled, putting on my sunglasses. It was just business. They forgot to renew the subscription. My phone buzzed. A notification from my bank. The wire transfer from Vanguard had cleared. $120 million. I looked at the number. It was just digits. It didn't fix the childhood neglect. It didn't fix the betrayal. But as I walked toward my car, I realized it did fix one thing. It fixed the future. I got in my car and drove. Not home. I drove to the nearest nursery. I needed more hives. The spring flow was heavy this year, and my colony was about to expand. The disassembly of a dynasty is a messy thing. It doesn't happen all at once like in the movies. It happens in slow, painful increments. It happens in cardboard boxes and auction listings. 2 months after the liquidation hearing, I drove past the estate. I didn't need to go that way. I told myself I was taking the scenic route to the apiary supply store, but deep down, I wanted to see. The iron gates, usually shut tight to keep the commoners out, were wide open. A real estate sign swung in the breeze, foreclosure auction, Saturday. The lawn, once manicured to within an inch of its life, was starting to look shaggy. Weeds were poking through the cracks in the driveway where Preston's Jaguar used to park. The Jaguar was gone, seized by the bank to pay off the outstanding loans on the warehouse expansion he had authorized 3 years ago, a project that never made a dime. I slowed down but didn't stop. I saw a moving truck in the driveway. Not a high-end service, but a U-Haul-it-yourself van. I saw my mother, Beatrice, carrying a lamp. She looked small. She was wearing jeans, which I had never seen her wear in my life. She looked like just another old woman moving out of a house she couldn't afford. I heard later from a friend in town that Conrad had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. His crypto wallets were empty, drained by bad trades and the legal fees from the vendor lawsuits. He was apparently living in a studio apartment above a garage, working at a car dealership. The irony was rich, he was finally selling cars, just not the ones he thought he'd be driving. As for my parents, they moved into a 2-bedroom condo on the other side of the highway. It was a decent place, perfectly adequate for a retired couple. But for Preston and Beatrice Vance, it was a prison cell. No country club. No wine cellar. No status. I hadn't spoken to them since the courthouse. I had blocked their numbers again. Victor told me they had tried to reach out through him, asking for family reconciliation mediation, which is lawyer speak for, please give us an allowance. Victor had politely declined on my behalf. But living in the same town meant our paths would eventually cross. It happened at the grocery store on a Tuesday evening. I was in the produce aisle, picking out apples. Valerie? I froze. I knew that voice. But it lacked the imperious snap it used to have. It sounded frail. I turned around. Beatrice was standing there, holding a basket with a loaf of generic bread and a carton of milk. She looked tired. Her hair wasn't dyed anymore, the gray roots were showing. Hello, Mother, I said, keeping my hands on my cart. She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. We saw the article in the business journal. About your promotion at Vanguard. You looked good in the photo. Thank you. It's a good job. Your father misses you, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He sits in his chair all day. He just stares at the wall. He says he wishes he had listened to you about the fuel logic back in 2015. I didn't say anything. It was a nice sentiment, 5 years too late. We're struggling, Val, she continued, stepping closer. The condo fees are high. And with the medical bills, if you could just, maybe help us with the down payment on a smaller place? Or just coffee? Can we just have coffee? People were starting to look. A mother with a toddler glanced at us. I looked at this woman who had stood by while my father called me the help. The woman who had gone on television and told the world I was a monster to protect her social standing. I felt a flicker of pity, but I stomped it out. Pity was the crack in the door that let the wolves back in. I can't do that, Mother, I said. Why, she cried, a little louder now. We're your family. Everyone makes mistakes. Family doesn't fire family at the dinner table, I said calmly. Family doesn't try to steal their life's work. You didn't want a daughter, Beatrice. You wanted an employee. And I quit. I turned my card around. Valerie. Don't you walk away from me, she shouted, the old venom leaking back into her voice. I kept walking. I didn't look back. I paid for my apples, walked to my car, and drove home. I didn't cry. I just felt lighter. 6 months later. My office at Vanguard Systems was on the 42nd floor. It was all glass and steel, overlooking the city skyline. It was clean. Efficient. On the wall behind my desk hung the antique grandfather clock I had rescued from the Logicor lobby. I had spent weeks restoring it. I stripped the varnish, polished the brass pendulum, and oiled the gears. Now, it ticked with a steady, rhythmic heartbeat that filled the room. My title was Senior Vice President of Innovation Strategy. It was a mouthful, but the work was real. I led a team of 50 engineers. Young, bright kids who actually read documentation and asked questions. I didn't have to fight to be heard here. When I spoke in meetings, the room went quiet. Not out of fear, but out of respect. They knew who I was. I was the woman who wrote the ghost code. I was the woman who took down a giant with a single piece of paper. My assistant knocked on the door. Valerie? The CEO wants to review the Q3 projections for the new autonomous fleet. Tell Eleanor I'll be there in 5 minutes, I smiled. I swiveled my chair and looked out the window. Far below, the city moved like a circuit board. Cars, trucks, people, all following invisible lines of logic. I thought about the reversion clause. Section 17C. People called it a trap. They said I tricked my family. But it wasn't a trap. It was a test. A test of character. If they had treated me with respect, if they had valued me as a partner instead of a servant, the clause would have never mattered. I would have renewed the license for $1. I would have given them everything. But they failed the test. They thought they could build a castle on a foundation they despised. They thought the decoration wouldn't fight back. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my home security system. The camera showed my backyard. The sun was shining on the white wooden boxes. I had expanded the apiary. I now had 20 hives. I was producing enough honey to sell at the local farmers market on weekends. It was my favorite part of the week. No suits, no code, just me and the jars of gold. I checked the timestamp on the camera. The bees were swarming around the entrance of Hive 1. They were bringing in the last of the autumn nectar. There is a rule in beekeeping: if a queen is weak, if she stops laying, or if she puts the colony in danger, the workers will ball her. They will surround her, vibrate their wings to create intense heat, and eliminate her. Then, they raise a new queen. It's not cruelty. It's survival. I stood up and grabbed my tablet. I checked my reflection in the glass window. The gray hair was still there, but I wasn't hiding it in a messy bun anymore. It was cut sharp, styled. I looked like who I was always meant to be. I walked out of my office, past the ticking clock. I had eliminated the weak queen. I had saved the colony. And for the first time in 48 years, the hive was thriving. I saw my dad at a restaurant yesterday. He looked frail. He tried to wave at me from across the room, hoping I'd come over and pay his bill. I didn't wave back. I just finished my meal and left. Am I wrong for that? Or do they deserve the silence? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of absolute justice, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. Leave a comment with your city so I can see where the Logic Legion is listening from. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.